Not just for diets anymore.
I knew that.
What's most important to you in life? Hi, I'm Lamar Colt, the owner of Seven Flags Fitness and Racket Club. We all know material things won't guarantee you happiness. Good health means having it all. Seven Flags is something for everyone. Whether you want to lose tone, build, increase endurance, or just enjoy yourself in the courts, this is a club for you. Give us just 3 hours a week and our staff will guarantee you more energy, less stress, a positive attitude, and a body you'll feel better about. Don't put it off. Join now for only $99 or join free if you're a current member of another Des Moines club.
This is CNN. From Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, John Sununu. Tonight, advice and consent. In the Crossfire, Democratic Representative Ron Wyden of Oregon, member of the Subcommittee on Health and the Environment, and Dr. William Archer, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services.
Good evening. Welcome to Crossfire. Yesterday on Capitol Hill, our two guests squared off over this year's angle on the abortion controversy. It's the so-called gag rule, a Bush administration ruling that family planning clinics taking government money may not even mention the word abortion to their patients. The American Medical Association and pro-choice groups call this censorship. The Supreme Court upheld the gag rule last June. Congress voted to repeal the rule, but President Bush vetoed the bill and Congress failed to override the veto. With us so far? Okay. 11 days ago, the administration announced a clarification of the rule. Doctors, they say, may discuss abortion, but nurses and other staff may not. Critics say that if you read the fine print, the new rule still gags doctors. And anyway, nurses are people too. Defenders of the rule say taxpayer money should not be spent promoting abortion, and that's not censorship. Mona Charon is sitting in for John Sununu. Mona?
Congressman Wyden, here's what you said to your constituents in a March 30th newsletter. This rule means that even if the pregnancy poses a serious threat to a woman's health and she asks for information about it, her health care provided is restricted from answering her, unquote. Now, you know that that is not true. Under any interpretation of this rule, a doctor is fully within his rights and would have no choice but to refer a pregnant woman who is in danger to the proper medical treatment. Isn't that the case?
Mona, the fact of the matter is you can take a low-income pregnant woman who has diabetes, she may have cancer, she may have HIV, various serious threatening ailments, possibly not absolutely at the brink of death. The fact is, and I brought the new rule today, that woman cannot be counseled that abortion is one of her options.
What do you mean by counseled? I mean, if she goes and sees a doctor, he is going to refer her to a prenatal clinic, and they are going to immediately perform whatever therapeutic abortion might be necessary in those extreme cases.
Unless it's life-threatening, and there are an awful lot of serious threats to a woman that are not life-threatening, that woman is not going to get the truth. And that's what's so vicious about this. This administration is engaged in mind control. After all the discussion about how they want the American people to have choices, they want them to have information, here's a program where they can't get the facts.
Dr. Archer, this so-called clarification, doctors can discuss abortion, but nurses can't. What sense does that make?
Well, the fact is that the clarification that you talk about coming out on March 20th actually has been an ongoing process. In November, the president issued a letter to the department which said that doctors would be able to give complete medical information to their patients. So when we came out in March with new information on this was nothing new. The thing that's amazing is that nobody said anything in November.
This rule has been around since 1988, so if it was only in November that you got around to saying, oh, by the way, it doesn't count for doctors, that's still a change.
No, it wasn't a change. The fact is there's always been an ability to look at the regulation and find a place for interpretation. And when I came to this job, I'm an obstetrician gynecologist. I looked at it, I said it's important to provide complete medical information. I believe physicians can do this because they're fully trained to give complete medical information.
Let's assume you're right for a second, that that's what the rule has always said. What sense does it make to have a rule that says doctors can mention the word abortion, but nurses cannot?
It's certainly not because we believe nurses are not trained to do what we hire them to do, and that is contraception and sexually transmitted disease services. When we train them, we have the funds, we have the programs that train them. They are not trained in pregnancy-related services. It is inappropriate for a patient to not be fully informed by someone who's completely trained in
wait a
pregnancy.
minute.
Doctors are fully trained.
You know that the issue of abortion, the decision a woman has to make about whether or not to have an abortion, is not an issue that is primarily medical, that requires a doctor. It is an emotional, moral issue to some people, emotional issue to everybody. It does not require a doctor to tell you whether that you have an option to have an abortion.
That's not the issue, Mike. The issue is the only reason doctors come into this is because people have, like Ron Wyden, have been saying that women who were in medical danger were not going to get the proper advice.
I got to go back to my original question. So you've got a rule here that says doctors can discuss abortion, nurses cannot discuss abortion. I'm asking you, where is the sense
So you
of
say
that?
it's a moral issue, and you want the federal government to get involved in the moral distinction.
No, I'm saying, haven't you totally sacrificed your alleged principle that the government, even indirectly through advice, should not be funding...
Mike, let me try and explain
let me ask
I've
a question. Well, let me ask Dr. Archer, and then if he gets it wrong, you can bail him out. You've got the government, your principle, as I understand it, is people have a constitutional right to abortion, but the government has the right to say taxpayers' money should not be spent on it, even to recommend it or advise it or anything else.
That's right.
Haven't you totally sacrificed that principle when you say that doctors can discuss it, but nurses can't?
We're talking about medical information. We're not talking about making advice to patients about whether they should or should not, on moral grounds or ethical grounds, make the decision for abortion. The fact is always any information that's been provided should have been done in a non-directive fashion. And the fact is that it wasn't done that way. Women were pushed to abortions. There was pressure for them to make that abortion decision, and that is inappropriate for the federal government to get involved in a program which encourages women to choose abortion as their option.
Mike, that's just not accurate. There's been no documentation whatsoever that women are being steered towards abortion. What's going on here is that the administration is trying to have it both ways. They want to moderate their position because they know they're in trouble on women's health issues. But the fact is that 90% of all the work in these clinics is done by nurses, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, social workers. Even if you accept, Mona, even if you accept the notion that there's been a moderation with doctors, and I do not because it's nowhere in writing, all the others are gagged. They do 90% of the work in these clinics.
Let's do a little history here and explain how these rules came into being in the first place. Title X clinics, the Congress set up Title X in order to provide contraceptive counseling for women. Contraception is something that the government wants to promote, family planning, not abortion, and so they provided this money. The same people who were doing Title X counseling were very often just next door also providing abortions, Planned Parenthood, organizations like that. And there was a lot of contamination of the Title X project because of its proximity, both financial and an actual space, to abortion clinics. And so the Congress stepped in and said, look, we want to be clear. We don't want our Title X people saying, obviously your contraception failed, step right next door here and we can solve the problem for you. And that was happening.
First of all, the General Accounting Office has not found any evidence other than a few anecdotes. We're going to gag 4 million women in this country, 4 million poor women who won't get the same rights as if you're rich and affluent.
They're gagging the doctors.
No, we're going to gag 4 million women, poor women in this country who won't get all their options because of a handful of anecdotes. And by the way, this was not done by the Congress. The gag rule was an invention of the Reagan administration, then supported by the Bush administration.
You say that this is the only way that poor women can get information. Have you ever ridden the subway in New York City and seen the Planned Parenthood ads everywhere? I mean, it's not as if the federal government is the only place people can find out about things.
One of the things that GAO did say was that 6 out of 7 clinics were giving unbalanced information and that they were giving only information on abortion and keeping away the other options from women. In 6 out of 7 clinics that the GAO looked at...
Haven't you gone a little bit overboard if that's the problem by saying now they can't mention the abortion option at all?
I don't know. I don't understand. I'm refuting the point that he says the GAO said there were no problems. The fact was the GAO said you need to issue a new rule.
Let's just be clear. You walk into an abortion clinic, a family planning clinic now, if you're a poor woman and you're pregnant and you want advice, you don't get to see a doctor because there aren't that many doctors. Basically, the place is run by nurses, nurse practitioners, and others.
That's the whole point.
Woman says, for example, I was raped by my uncle and I've missed my period. What do I do? And there's no doctor.
We're going to refer you to someone who does pregnancy-related services somebody that the federal government funds, the maternal child health programs, the community health centers, and they can provide complete information.
Including
and those
abortion.
people, including abortion, and those sites are fully trained in providing pregnancy services.
What a game! What a game! Why
Is it a game? Is it a game except for the fact that a two-tiered system comes when you tell poor women, you only get limited services, and we're not going to give you the referral to comprehensive health care. You're going to go to abortion.
Like, now you're saying you're somehow doing poor women a favor by saying that they're not allowed to be told certain things about their options?
We're saying just as...
I'm sorry, we're going to have to take a break here. When we come back, we're going to find out whether the federal government can sponsor gun clinics.
Breakfast burrito. Here we go. 99 cents each, they're good to go. For a limited time, get Weston on the Big Muffin. They make real sandwich. They're really something to taste. I'm kicking all day long. Mickey D's. Going on, going on. What you want is what you get at McDonald's today.
Good times with friends. Hey, they're special. Sometimes you wish they would never end. The care you show is just as special. Friends know when to say when.
The family of Budweiser beers is proud of all the friendships they've helped make. So when they remind you to know when to say when, it's all in the name of friendship.
Friends know when to say when.
Hello? 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 The way I see it, other computer companies respond to their customers as if they were hard of hearing.
Excuse me.
I rest my case.
Bill Hayden, Chairman, CompuAd.
You may not recognize their faces or know all their names, but they have decades of experience covering politics, the White House, and Capitol Hill. They've worked for the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, every major publication and network. They're the best at what they do. CNN introduces the most distinguished team ever assembled to follow the 1992 elections. From start to finish, you'll get the whole picture of Campaign USA 92 only on CNN.
Welcome back. We're discussing the so-called gag rule with Dr. William Archer, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services, who helped draft these regulations, and Representative Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, member of the Health Subcommittee that has been critical of these regulations. Dr. Archer, we interrupted you. You were about to make a point.
Well, I think it's important to note that, as a physician, if I am not fully trained in an area, if someone comes to me and they need cardiovascular surgery, I don't launch into, well, I think you should or shouldn't have cardiovascular surgery. I think I should refer her on to someone who can give her that complete service, or the patient that, or for me.
But you're being a little disingenuous.
No, I'm not.
The reason for this rule is not a concern that poor women will get inadequate advice about abortion.
As a physician, I really believe that you're wrong about that. The fact is that in a healthcare system that is a public health system, there are places where people can go to get particular services. That's the way it is. It might be nice to combine them.
You're saying that the reason the administration has proposed this gag rule is not to discourage abortion, but to make sure that not a mere nurse or nurse practitioner announces that this is one of your options.
If that were the case, why didn't our rule go to the other programs that were funded by the federal government?
You haven't tried that yet.
We don't intend to.
What this means in rural areas in particular, we heard this in our hearing, is that a lot of low-income women aren't going to get any care at all. They go to these family planning programs because they're going to get primary care. Many of them have only one doctor and maybe a modest additional staff. They aren't going to get any care at all.
That is just not the case. When a woman comes in a rural area, there are nurses who are trained in pregnancy. They may also be doing family planning, and when
they're not allowed to discuss abortion.
They may, in their role as a nurse practitioner, fully trained in pregnancy services and prenatal care, as long as that transition has been made into the MCH program. So the reality is just not that.
They may have to go several hundred miles, and what Dr. Archer told us yesterday is that what the administration did first is they took care of their politics. They wanted to win support among physicians and look like they were moderating their rule. The fact is that poor women are going to have to move several hundred miles, and who knows what they'll get.
Politics are concerned on your side of this as well, aren't they? I mean, let's imagine, for the sake of argument, that the federal government decides that it wants to fund gun clinics. They want to promote the safe handling of guns, keep the safety clip on, you know, keep it clean, keep it away from children, that sort of thing, right? And somebody comes in and says that they want target shooting practice at this gun clinic. Well, the federal government has said this is for safety, this is not for target shooting. Now, would you be in the position of saying their Second Amendment rights are being violated, I won't hear of this, this is a gag rule? No.
I guess you can speculate about just about any example, but what I want to make sure people understand is that I want women to know about all their options. They ought to know about foster care, they ought to know about prenatal care, they ought to know about adoptions, and yes, they also ought to know about abortion. They're not going to know about it, and getting into examples about the federal funding of gun clinics,
well,
I don't think clarifies the issue.
Don't you think the federal government, look, these clinics were for family planning. Do you consider abortion a method of family planning?
I'm not in favor, and by the way, the federal government bars the funding of abortions through family planning dollars. Family planning programs are about information and women getting all the information about their choices.
But if a woman is pregnant and walks into a family planning clinic, clearly she's in the wrong place, right?
She's not going to get all her information, all the choices that she needs.
She is not told, is she, Dr. Archer? Oh, I'm sorry, you're pregnant, therefore family planning is not an issue. Get out of here. She's told you can do this, you can do that, you can do the other. She is not told you can do the one thing that you don't want her to do.
What we're saying is we're going to we're not going to mislead a client. We're not going to encourage her to anything except for to get her to the next place, which is the referral to comprehensive health care. That is the most important issue. And I think another issue that there are two issues. One is this has been implemented in 5 states in this country in 1988. Where was the outcry? There has been no incidents. There have been no problems. This has been going on in this country, and yet all of a sudden there's a big issue.
I'm sorry, my impression is it's been a very big issue for years.
Well,
it was a big issue certainly last June when the Supreme Court...
But this is 4 years ago.
It was, my understanding was these rules were on hold while they were litigated.
No,
the Supreme Court...
That's not correct. In Texas, Kentucky, Iowa, South Dakota, Nevada, these have been implemented in either all or parts of those states.
Well, if I lived there, I might be mad. I don't live there. Naturally, it's a bigger issue than when it becomes a national issue. Don't be disingenuous.
And it comes down to whether or not you want federal tax dollars to promote censorship. That's what the AMA called it.
Or promote abortion.
Virtually every major medical group. And by the way, the AMA and the American Bar Association, both of which submitted statements yesterday, are neutral on the question of abortion. They have not taken a position favoring abortion, and they have come out.
To find a doctor to perform
they have come out against this administration's position on the gag rule.
I think another very sad issue in this is that when I was testifying, I kept trying to bring up the point of very significant women's health issues, and all we seem to talk about in family planning is abortion. Women are 90% of the women that come into family planning are looking.
No, I said that. You're the guys who are making a big deal out of this gag rule.
Look, I'm an obstetrician. I came to run a program as an administrator to try to make a good program under this administration for women's health. And it means getting chlamydia services and screening for HIV and being sensitive about the issues of violence and sexual abuse and all of the things that women are seeking. That's 90% of the clients. Not any words of that in our discussion before for
Dr. Archer, it's because you guys have got this gag rule. If you got rid of the gag rule, I'm sure that Congress and everyone else would be, and Planned Parenthood and all those groups would be delighted to discuss how we can increase
the abortion issue is holding family planning hostage. Family planning is a program which needs to go ahead, and we need to get abortion out of family planning, and then there will be bipartisan support for family planning in this country. And then we can get comprehensive family planning services, preventive services to women who need them.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the American Medical Association.
I'm David French in Washington. Looking ahead to prime news, a Supreme Court decision could clear the way for some schools to end busing for racial balance. An officer testifies he feared for his life the night of Rodney King's beating. And Democratic presidential candidates face off in New York. Those stories and more coming up on Prime News.
For those interested in a Highline Japanese car, Audi offers an alternative. the all-new Audi 100 V6. The first German automobile designed to not only turn heads, but opinion as well. The all-new Audi 100 V6. To drive it is to take control.
The man who lives in this house made good money in stocks. The man who lives in this house made even more money selling him the stocks. If you'd like your money to make more money for you instead of someone else, call Oldie Discount. We'll provide you with personal service and investments to help you achieve financial success. So move up to Oldie, America's full-service discount broker.
It happens every morning in London, Paris, and Madrid, just as the city starts to stir. In Munich, Manchester, Zurich, and Brussels, just as the business day begins. In Glasgow, Stockholm, Frankfurt, and Milan, as the new day arrives, so do we. American Airlines, with more non-stops from across the U.S. to Europe than any other airline. And beginning June 8th, we'll also arrive in Berlin. So fly the one airline with more non-stops to more of Europe than anyone. American Airlines. Something special to Europe.
Dr. Archer, as you know, the American Medical Association is very much opposed to this gag rule, and they're even opposed to it under your new interpretation. As a doctor, and as I presume a conservative Republican in your position, does it bother you at all that the federal government is telling doctors and nurses, or even just nurses, what they're allowed to say to patients?
If I hire someone in my office as a physician, and they start saying something that I don't believe is good for my patients, I'm not going to let them continue doing that. And as an administrator of a program, when I hire nurses and doctors to do a particular service, and that is family planning services, if they are promoting something that is inappropriate, then I believe that we need to...
Once again, it's not a question of promoting, and this is also not a question of being in your office. These federal funds, we should make clear, these are not federal clinics. These are clinics that take some of their money, get a grant from the federal government, like many institutions around the country.
Nobody tells them that they have to take federal funds, but they want to provide these services. We think it's appropriate to provide...
If they accept $1 of federal...
That's the key point. What Dr. Archer is saying is, sure, don't take federal funds, close your doors, restrict access to poor people, and that's what's going to happen, because without the federal funds, a lot of these clinics can't make it.
All right, let's discuss this gag rule issue, because you've said this a number of times. You've talked about restricting the speech of doctors and 4 million women and the rest of it. The fact is that the federal government restricts people's speech all the time, don't they? The Hatch Act forbids federal employees to engage in political activity. That's an obvious First Amendment restriction. The Ethics in Government Act. There are many, many things that the government does that restrict people's ability to speak in certain limited circumstances.
Mona, if you want to endorse censorship, you go ahead and endorse it.
You voted for it. Where do you stand on all these things?
I'm a sponsor of the bill to change the Hatch Act. I voted to change the Hatch Act, which is the bill...
What about the Ethics in Government Act?
The specific one we're dealing with is the Hatch Act, and let me tell you what I think our listeners are going to be concerned about, and that is, once you restrict this kind of information in a medical setting, the next step is going to be something like restricting people on Medicare from getting information the government doesn't want to have. That's the dangerous precedent being set in healthcare.
Don't you accept the right of the government to promote some kinds of activity and not at the expense of other kinds of activity?
I think the federal government ought to do everything it can to restrict censorship, particularly in the healthcare area.
Don't you accept...
Because in healthcare, what's important is that people know the options. The physician,
can the government prefer childbirth to abortion?
I want the federal government to tell a woman all her options. Foster care. I support adoptions. I support prenatal care. But yes, the government ought to tell women, for example, who have diabetes and HIV and cancer, that her condition may worsen if she doesn't know about abortion.
But the rules forbid that.
Unless it is life-threatening, they won't tell.
I'm afraid Congressman Wyden's run out of the clock. Thanks a lot, Congressman. Thank you, Dr. Archer. Mona and I will have a couple of seconds left in a moment.
GMC truck, our only business is trucks, and has been for over 80 years. A dedication to truck strengths and values to keep in mind. Because when you need to haul something, tow something, carry precious cargo, find new trails, or simply ride high and proud, there's nothing quite as strong as a truck. GMC truck, the strength of experience.
Good times with friends, hey, they're special. Sometimes you wish they would never end. The care you show is just as special. Friends know when to say when.
The family of Budweiser beers is proud of all the friendships they've helped make. So when they remind you to know when to say when, it's all in the name of friendship.
Friends know when to say when.
I've been thinking, the way our competitors do business, it's no wonder their computers cost so much. It's too bad you have to foot the bill.
Bill Hayden, Chairman, CompuAd.
85 copies a minute, 5,000 copies an hour. Introducing the Meta DC 8585, our most sizable contribution to business productivity ever.
On CNN tomorrow, campaign hopefuls hit New York, the city that can hit back, on Cryer and Company. Then on NewsHour, her husband's killer only served 1 month in jail. Her fight to find out why. All tomorrow on CNN.
For a transcript, send $4 to Crossfire Transcripts, Journal Graphics Incorporated, 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203, or call 303-831-9000.
Mona, I got news for you. The government does fund gun clinics, and they include target practice, and I think it's a waste of taxpayer money. But look, of course the government, under certain circumstances, can restrict the use its money is put to, and can even restrict speech. The question is not, does it have the right to do it? The question is, does it make sense? Is it fair to poor women? And it's ludicrous to tell doctors and nurses what they can and cannot say when a woman walks in looking for health care.
The purpose of this money was to promote family planning. Once a woman is pregnant, family planning has obviously failed, and it's irrelevant.
As I explained to you, the rule does not say when you walk in and you're pregnant, oh, you have to leave, we're not going to give you any advice at all. They say, we'll give you this advice, adoption, anything else. They will not tell you abortion. That's the only thing the rule forbids.
You just want abortion. That's the bottom line.
Please. From the left, I'm Mike Kinsley. Good night for Crossfire.
From the right, I'm Mona Sharon. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of Crossfire.
Prime News is up next. Let's get a quick look at the headlines.
Michael, we will have details on the Supreme Court decision today on school desegregation. The ruling has implications for hundreds of school systems around the nation. The UN Security Council votes on sanctions against Libya, and the police officer that hit Rodney King the most takes a stand in his own defense. Prime News is right after this.
Coming up, Prime News, followed by Larry King Live after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
Do you realize just how much difference there is in life insurance rates from one insurance company to the next? For instance, if you're in good health and don't smoke cigarettes, Garden State Life Insurance may be able to save you as much as 50% off the cost of your life insurance. That's right. 30, 40, 50% off what you'd have to pay for a comparable amount of coverage elsewhere. And not just this month, but year after year for the rest of your life. Savings like that are well worth looking into. So if you need $100,000 to $1 million or more of quality term life insurance, you owe it to yourself to get the facts fast by calling now. 800-257-1257, toll free for this free information package, including a personal coverage proposal that shows you just how much your savings might be. There's no obligation, no sales pressure, and it could be a real eye-opener. For instance, as your Garden State Life representative can tell you,
if you're a healthy 40-year-old who doesn't smoke cigarettes, you may qualify for $100,000 worth of quality term life insurance at rates so low they're less than 55 cents a day.
How do we do it? First, you save because we offer this life insurance at these low rates only to people who are in good health.
That cuts our risk and your premiums. Then, because this quality term life insurance is sold in amounts of at least $100,000 or more, you get the advantage of volume discounts. And it's easy to do business with Garden State Life Insurance because you deal with us directly. You're always just a phone call away. So call today, 800-257-1257, toll free, 257-1257 for your free personal coverage proposal. No obligation, no pressure. Discover how this quality term life insurance could save you as much as 50% off your premiums every year for the rest of your life. 800-257-1257, toll free. Call Garden State Life Insurance for your free information today, 257-1257.